Afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us. My name is Turner Spears. I'm the Director of Alumni Services for Delta Kappa Epsilon. Today I'm joined by our Executive Director, Doug Lamper, and then a member of our Board of Directors, Kevin O'Brien. The reason that we're conducting this town hall is that over the past, I guess about 10 days now, we've been getting a ton of questions about how coronavirus is impacting chapter operations and kind of the best ways to move forward, what sort of resources we have, what are the headquarters policies. So we figured the best way to disseminate this information in mass and to do it in the most clear and effective manner is to host a town hall to answer all your questions. So to get us started, I'm going to turn it over to Doug.
Turner, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. And thank you for joining, everyone. I know this is a crazy time for everyone, but there's a lot that the fraternity is still doing. I want everybody to kind of be aware of where we're at. HQ is still operating. We're operating probably on overtime, actually, overdrive, I should say. We're still working hard to provide services to our members, our chapters, and alumni as well. Of course, most of our services will have to be virtual now, but from our standpoint, the academic year is still going. You guys are still in school for the most part, even albeit virtually. But there's still a lot of responsibility for us as to hold ourselves to high standards. And before we really kick off here, I just want to remind everybody of one of the values of DKE is embodied in our objects, and that object says the promotion of honorable friendship and useful citizenship. So please remember during these times that we still have the responsibility to act as honorable DKEs and citizens of our countries or the localities where we live. So please consider that going forward. We're still operating, still going strong, and DKE International, from our standpoint, is here to provide services and answer questions and help our chapters keep operating even under these highly unusual circumstances. So that's just a quick intro. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin O'Brien now. Kevin is, as Turner said, he's a board member of Delta Kappa Epsilon. He has been for 6 or 7 years now, an attorney in New Orleans, and helps out an awful lot with a lot of legal questions that come our way. He gives us a lot of advice. So I'm going to turn it over to Kevin because some of these issues that you guys are facing are either directly legal or have some legal implications. So Kevin, let me throw it over to you.
All right, well, thank you, Doug. Let me start off like every lawyer does with a disclaimer. I'm licensed to practice in Louisiana, but nowhere else. So if you're looking for definitive legal advice, it's a real good idea to check with a lawyer that's licensed to practice in your jurisdiction. That said, we've got kind of 2 basic sets of legal questions that have come up. One, in terms of how we respond to the coronavirus. One with regard to contract clauses, and I guess really they're both related to contract clauses, that being either in leases one way or another, or in event contracts. Any contract is the law between the parties, and that's the first place you should look to. Turns out that actually reading all the fine print is a very useful thing to do. Some contracts will contain what they call an impossibility clause or an act of God clause, where if there's some event that occurs outside the control of the parties that makes the event impossible or the lease impossible, that cancels the lease or event. Most leases in particular won't have that. Generally speaking, the lease provides for the tenant a right of undisturbed occupancy of whatever it is you're leasing, and for the landlord a right to collect the rent, and then a whole lot of fine print that's all intended to protect the landlord and not the tenant. Rarely is there a provision about the impossibility in a occupant in a lease, other than if the premises gets destroyed by hurricane, earthquake, falling meteor, infestation of goats, whatever might happen. So in a situation like this, for example, you've got a lease provision. Meanwhile, I would expect that most of the students have now gone home for the balance of the semester. My experience is that people are not really wild about paying rent once they're no longer living someplace. So that presents 2 different sets of problems. If you happen to be the landlord, if you're your house corporation, what have you, now you've got either a lease contract with the chapter or with the individual students. It's not really impossible to continue to occupy the premises unless somebody's decided to tell you to get out for public health reasons. Here in New Orleans, for example, we have a everybody stay home provision, but that's doesn't get you there in terms of helping you with the lease issue. So now you're in a situation of trying to work it out as best you can between yourselves with, what do we do now that we can't actually stay here any longer, or now that no one needs to stay here any longer. Your average lease doesn't provide you an out for that if you're the student. Even the same as if you flunk out, for example, you're still supposed to pay your lease. There's nothing that keeps you from living there. Other big picture question is, what do you do about contracts you've entered into? Certainly most of your chapters have contracts or agreements for some premises to hold events, spring formal, what have you. Again, if there happens to be an impossibility clause, that's great. But here in this circumstance, you really have, in most states, implicit in every contract is an impossibility clause, which is to say if it is impossible to honor the original intent of the contract becomes void, which sounds great in principle. If in fact your chapter has gone home and now you're stuck with a $3,000 advance deposit that the contract says is non-refundable, you've got a little bit of a battle to work over. And the fact of the matter is, whatever hotel or facility you've had your contract with has had everybody try to cancel, so they're not going to be anxious to give any money back for sure. My suggestion would be, as a practical matter, make your inquiry, let them know, hey, it looks like it's impossible for us to show up. If you're in a jurisdiction where they've issued an order that says, no public gatherings of more than 50 or 10 or what have you, that gives you a pretty good argument as far as impossibility, which doesn't necessarily mean they're willing to stroke a check and give you your money back. So I'd first communicate, hey, it's now impossible for us to have this event. We'd like our money back, or it looks like it'll be impossible for us to have this event, depending on how far away it is. We'd like our money back. And presuming you get pushback rather than a refund, my best suggestion would be to see if you can contact an attorney that's maybe friend of a chapter or father of a chapter member, uncle, what have you, and see if you can get a little free advice to, okay, how can we move this forward? Because we really ought to be entitled to get our money back because it's impossible for us now to have this event. And I'm not sure if that covers everything we're looking to cover, Turner. If there's more particulars, come back to me.
Absolutely. And that's a good point that we were looking to make in addition to the questions that we're going to answer here today, is that the fraternity aims to communicate extremely consistently with all of our members throughout this process, every level of membership. So as we get more questions from our members, there's always the possibility that we will have additional town halls. And throughout this process, we've created a response page on our website, which is dke.org/COVID, COVID. So dke.org/COVID. And on this website is where we'll post the most up-to-date information, any news about this town hall, future town halls, any questions or policy changes, everything like that. But Kevin, thanks so much for kind of offering that advice, because I'm sure that impacts every chapter.
Well, good luck.
Awesome. Okay, so outside of that, let's go ahead and jump to back over to Doug for a question and answer portion. So we've received several questions regarding chapter operations. How could we possibly continue to operate right now? All of those sorts of questions. So Doug, what would be your general suggestion or advice to chapters right now?
Well, first, let me start by saying that, just reiterating what you said a moment ago, by Friday, we expect to release that website, and that will be your go-to source of information and suggestions for how to operate your chapter. But what I'd consider as a general suggestion here is just to sort of think about your fraternity, your chapter's operations in the sense of what we can do versus what we can't do. Just think proactively about what types of things you can do to get ahead, such as keeping your rosters up to date on Deke United, have your officers and committee chairmen continue to be thinking about their goals for next semester and in fact this summer. Review the tutorials, the information on the Deke websites, and just understand what your resources are. If you can, I would love to see some of our chapters hosting retreats, either exec retreats or full chapter, as long as you're operating within the the constraints of the CDC, and I'm talking about virtual retreats here. Establish your new membership contracts, all the things that you should be thinking about doing normally that you can still do. So that's what I mean by what can we do, what can't we do. So look for that website to be released on Friday. So I think that'll be, and if you have questions, keep bringing the questions forward, and we will keep expanding that website to answer other questions that you all have.
Awesome. So, the international fraternity does a ton of traveling. We've got chapter consultants that cover all of our different regions. So since the staff is no longer traveling for the semester and focusing on virtual consulting, what does that look like in terms of receiving consultant visits?
Right. Okay. So we realize there are several chapters who have not received a consultant visit for 2019-20. So what we're working on is, with all of our chapter consultants, is a way to deliver our chapter visits virtually. And we'll be contacting each chapter that hasn't received a visit, and some others as well, to see how this best fits with your needs. So, and when I say that, we'll be trying to organize calls with the exec boards, with Brother Betas for sure, and then any other committee heads that are still facing some questions about how to operate. So we're working on that right now. That'll be released like real soon, and then we'll start making our calls and developing these virtual visits. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, please contact any of us or your chapter consultant and let us know. And I say questions or suggestions as well. We'd love to hear what you guys think could make us more effective.
Definitely. Now, moving over to some policy changes, since this happened during the middle of the semester, a lot of guys had, events lined up or, their social calendar planned. So what is DKHQ's policy on hosting events right now?
Yeah, well, this is a big one. So first and foremost, always follow CDC guidance. So keep up to date on that. The websites are out there. It's pretty easy to find. So reschedule, probably what's going to involve is rescheduling your events. And of course, just like everybody else, exercise social distancing, okay? The next thing is, besides CDC, you want to follow all federal, state, provincial, local laws and regulations. So be aware of what the rules are in your location. And then third, generally follow university policies too, because they've got event guidelines surrounding the virus. We've been receiving copies of a lot of them. If you have not been receiving communication from your university, chances are we have. I'm assuming most of you have. But if not, please contact us and we'll let you know what we've received, if that would help. Follow their policies, and this goes for whatever type of university you're at. Just make sure you're following their policies. The other point I want to make here is that even though school is now virtual and most of you guys are at home, you got to understand that the policies and guidelines at your university are still in effect. And I'm talking about student conduct codes of behavior. So whatever their directives are, your chapter and you as individuals are still bound by that. They're still in effect. So whatever the university says is our policy still applies to you, regardless of whether you're at home or somewhere else. So these rules and regulations are still in effect. And by the way, so are ours. So our DKE International's rules are in effect, no matter where you are. So please keep that in mind as well whenever you're developing ideas for social events. And just finally, I just want to remind you once again, please just be responsible, practice responsibility, and let's be honorable deeks and rise to the occasion here, and understand that what we're all faced with is a unprecedented situation. But please just practice responsibility and remember that object which says, honorable friendship and useful citizenship.
So since a lot of the classes or majority of universities have switched to virtual classes, this has kind of put a halt to new member education in the traditional sense. So how should chapters proceed with new members, specifically initiation or other rituals?
Okay, great. Our intention is that no one who was a new member or pledge or a new member who joined DKE and was not initiated should not be no one should be ever denied membership because of this virus that's going around. So, and the other thing that can't happen is you cannot extend the process of new member education based on this. So what we want to make clear to everybody right now is a directive that we've introduced that says that new member education cannot be extended, and all new member education must be completed by May 1st of this year via virtual platforms. And we can help you with those virtual platforms. There's Zoom, there's GoToMeeting, Google Hangouts. I just got another, I know Google's extending their offers too. So we will be providing you with online curriculum guidance for any of these new member education programs. But you need to complete that by May 1st of this year. And then once new member education is complete, even though it's virtual, new members must take the oath of membership through one of these virtual platforms. We want you to extend the oath of membership to all these men so they will be members of Delta Kappa Epsilon. So once they are, and once that happens, oh, and by the way, we will provide more information about that as well, coming no later than Friday. So what happens then is that these guys will be new members, they're members of DKE, and what we'll do then is have a guidelines for you to how to proceed with initiations when campus operations resume, whether late spring or early fall. But we want your new members, to have the great experience of a meaningful initiation like we all did, and so that we'll be providing guidance on that, which will happen after school starts up again. But in the meantime, we do want you to make sure all these guys become members of Delta Kappa Epsilon by taking the oath of the fraternity with full rights and responsibilities and duties. If you have any questions about this, check out the website beginning Friday. But in the meantime, please feel free to call Craig Dick, who's our Director of Chapter Services, and he can be reached at craig@dke.org.
Awesome. So because our semester was cut short, can undergrads expect a refund on dues or risk management fees from the headquarters?
Well, no, at this time, DKE International is operating with dues collection as normal. We are on, and it's pretty simple why. Our resources to our chapters are still being delivered, in fact, probably increased at this point to battle the effects of COVID. And so we don't believe a refund is the best way to utilize our resources. We're still going full speed ahead, doing all the things that, with the exception of travel, I guess, doing the things that we do, and we're here as a resource for you all. And so we're going to continue with the expectation of these being paid. And so the consulting aspect is still involved, and all other appropriate resources here. Now, the other thing I want to mention too is that when we say dues, we usually refer to two things. There's the risk management fee or the health and safety fee, and that's approximately $143 a semester in the U.S., less in Canada, which it's a variable fee. And the other is to the DKE dues. Now, most of that risk management fee goes towards insurance coverage. So, and our insurance provider is certainly not cutting back on what we owe to them. So, they're not adjusting their bill, and so we don't have the flexibility to adjust that bill as well. So please be aware that coverage is still in effect too. So that's good news for everybody, including member accident protection. If you're not aware of what that is, please call me. But basically, it says it's accident protection coverage. So if you have an accident, regardless of whether it's related to the fraternity or not, you're eligible for medical costs to help supplement whatever costs you have for that. So all of those things are still in effect. Now, having said all that, we're spending a lot of time internally here on our budget discussions to see what tangible benefits we can offer to our chapters, resources for working remotely, and those sort of things. So, so that's the answer to the dues question. However, one thing I will say is that we're going to cancel any late fees or any fines that were applicable for that were being applied in March and April. So those will be canceled out, and you don't have to do anything about that. We'll take care of that.
Great. Now, what do you encourage in terms of refunds on local dues at the chapter level?
Well, each chapter is going to be different on that. I don't encourage refunds. Dues collection, in my opinion, for your own local dues should continue as planned. It may be beneficial for some of the leaders to extend payments out and work with members individually to address any circumstances. But just look at your own budget. We can't really answer that question for you. That's just my recommendation. Reevaluate what you're doing for your members and how your fee structure works. And then, just consider what's best for your chapter. But what you don't want to do is have this put your chapter into a financial hole. So just make sure you're continuing to collect the dues and IFC costs and things like that, especially your rent and those sort of things too. So be on the lookout for any unexpected things that may come your way because of this. Work with your university, and I think just hold off. So again, my recommendation is keep your collection going and hold off any discussion with your chapter of refunds until this all shakes out and we know what we're going to be doing. If you have any questions on that, as with anything else, please call any of us, Craig or Turner, and or your chapter consultant, and we'll be happy to help walk you through that.
Now, the last financial question is, will DKE offer flexibility on current promissory notes or notes signed during this time?
Well, if your chapter or any individuals feel that you cannot meet your financial obligations, I think just please give Mike Hiltz a ring, or send him an email, mike@dke.org, and he'll work and just explain your circumstances, and he'll work with you to figure out a good solution, a fair solution for everybody.
Okay, so what is the status of convention in terms of will we be billed if we're uncomfortable traveling in the coming weeks? What if the university has placed a limitation on travel? All these kind of convention travel questions.
Yeah, that's a big one for us. And we're still operating as though we're going to have our convention. It's June 18th through 21st in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we've got a lot of the programming is already done, actually. It's tremendous programming. And so we're hoping that we can still hold our convention because we think conventions are a great experience for everybody. Encourage everybody to go to at least one during their undergraduate career. So we're monitoring the situation very closely, working with the hotel, following all the travel guidelines and so forth. So it's still on the books for the 18th to 21st of June, and we'll just continue to monitor it and let everybody know what happens. I do suggest that if you've made flights, check with your airlines right now to just see what your options are, especially keep that in mind for if we decide to cancel the convention, which we hope we don't. Billing has already happened for the DKE University or the convention events. So we're going to continue doing that. If we have to reschedule the convention, we'll just apply the dues that we've already billed you for to whenever it is. Okay, so it may not be if it's not in June, we'll still have a convention at some point, and we'll just apply whatever we've collected to that. If your college or university has specific restrictions on travel, just let me know that as well, and we'll address those as they occur.
Definitely. Now, how does the coronavirus affect the Standards of Excellence program and the award process?
Okay, Standards of Excellence. We still expect our chapters to submit their responses to the Standards of Excellence program. They're due, I believe, April 15th, and it really is only going to take you a half an hour or less to complete those. So please consider that something you still need to do, April 15th. Feel free to include in that any plans that you were planning that have been canceled or postponed due to the semester being cut short. But yeah, so we want that. And awards, I think this will be on the website as well too, but awards, we're still going forward with awards too. So whatever your plans were to submit applications for that, please continue to do that.
Now, what can our chapter do to add value to membership while everyone is remote?
That's the key question. I mean, you can't physically interact with your brothers in the organization right now in your chapters, but your chapter can still play a large role in providing your members with services in time of need. We'll be providing some more guidance on that and some resources to help you with some remote brotherhood activities and ideas. But the key thing is that during this time of uncertainty, just stay in touch with everybody. So we're going to be providing you some online education and ongoing education opportunities, but just continue to think about what you can do. As a chapter, what can you do remotely even to help out in your community. Maybe there's some things you can do there. Can you do face-to-face calls with your chapter, either the exec board or the entire chapter? Zoom, GoToMeeting, FaceTime, all those sort of things. Keep the connections going. I would hate to see chapters kind of losing momentum over not being able to be together in person. Weekly phone calls with members of your chapter. I think it's important. Even the coursework. I think a lot of you guys are helping each other in coursework. Some of the older guys helping some of the younger guys. Keep that going. I've heard from one chapter that their university is not really cutting them a break in terms of easing up on the difficulty of their classes. So if you guys are still having full-on class loads, which I think you are, keep checking in with each other and things like that. So there are a lot of ideas that we're going to be putting on our website, but those are some of the things that I think of, and you guys probably have better ideas than I do, but I just encourage you to keep the communication and the personal touch together, even if you're not there in person.
Definitely. Now, what advice do you have for executive boards conducting business remotely?
Well, pretty much the same thing. I mean, I think you should still continue to have your exec board meetings once a week. Just use a video conference service. A lot of them are free, and we can help you with that, I think. Use the resources that we've got on our website that we've compiled out there, and just to the degree it's possible, keep things regular. Have your meetings on Monday nights at 7 p.m. just like you always did, or whatever it is. Keep your planning going, because the fraternity will come back at some point in the future. So we want to be able to hit the ground running when it does. So I think it's important to just keep a routine going and provide value in the way that your chapter can by connecting virtually with your exec board and with the entire chapter.
So some chapters have members returning from study abroad or other high-risk areas. What should they do?
Yeah. First of all, follow the guidelines of the CDC for sure, and then whatever your university, because if you guys have somebody returning from abroad, so does every other so a lot of other students from your college are too. So I'm sure that your universities have information on their sites that they're sending around to. So follow that, as well as local health officials regarding returning to campus. But each situation is a little different. Each country that they're returning from is a little different. So I would say just use the resources out there available. There's not much we can provide. We'll have a little bit on our site, but that's really just following the safety guidelines of the CDC, I would say. So, it's a difficult situation. It's an unprecedented situation. We're trying to do our best to provide resources to you to help you all through this.
And then our last question, which runs in conjunction with what Kevin was speaking about earlier, is just what advice do you have to chapter facilities or house corporations, and then also undergrads, remaining healthy in chapter facilities that remain open?
Okay, well, the house corporations are usually run by alumni. And if they're owners of the house, they're considered the landlords. And some of you guys live in houses that are rented to you by non-DEAC members as well. So for those, a lot of it's going to be up to the landlord, and he or she has to follow CDC regulations and all the local regulations as well. But in some of the guidance that we've been giving, and again, there will be more of that out for our alumni house corporations as well. But some of the guidance I would say is, if you have to leave the house open, if you're allowed to leave the house open, and some kids need to live there, it should be for the residents only, no visitors, and certainly no social events. So it's going to be based on the local the locality where you're at, but keep the house safe, keep it clean. It's very important at this time to not overextend what your regulations are from the CDC and from your state. Keep the houses clean, stay safe, and if you can get back home, that's probably the best thing to do anyways.
Okay, so that is all of our questions. So just as a reminder, we'll be posting all the most up-to-date information as we get it and as it's developed on our website, which is dke.org/COVID. And in addition to that, we'll probably be doing some more of these town halls and follow-ups. Our goal as an international organization is to offer you even more services than we have in the past, and to keep those lines of communications open. We're working with our partners very closely on this from the industry, so you'll see a lot of their material linked on the website as well. And then if you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to contact us at any point. Our contact information for each individual department is listed on the website, so you can contact exactly who you need to with your question to get the fastest response possible. So a big thanks to Kevin for coming in today and answering those legal questions for us and giving us some guidance there. And then thanks to Doug as well for talking to us on all these topics.